and welcome to this wonderful pattern. In this video, we are going to be making a striped washcloth, and if you haven't already, I definitely encourage you to go and print out this worksheet. This is going to make your life so much easier. But as we dive in here, this is a beginner pattern, and this pattern is great because it's going to show you how to begin changing colors within a pattern. So that's super awesome. So what we have here to do our striped washcloth is we have two different colors of yarn. I have our main color, which I'm going to be using this off-white, and then I'm going to be using this blue for the stripe. And these are just spare yarn skeins that I've had in my closet forever. So I'm just going to be using what I have on hand for this. And then I have my crochet hook here. And I also have a pencil to use on my pattern if I need it. And last but not least, I do have a ruler way up here, and we're going to be using that throughout the pattern. So let's jump right on in here. I'm going to move some of my stuff out of the way. Now, one thing to note for this pattern worksheet, let me tilt this up so you can kind of see it, is that when I was putting this worksheet together, I did not include the typical checkbox, as you can see here. And the reason for that is because, one, you're most likely going to complete this in one sitting. It's super easy. But two is that this doesn't actually count your rows for this pattern. As you can see here, we are just going to be crocheting until it measures a certain length, which is why we have our ruler up there. So I didn't include check boxes because you're not going to be completing a certain amount of rows. You're just going to be crocheting until you reach a certain length for your piece. So that being said, let's jump right on in here. I'm going to grab my main color. And as I've said in the beginner videos, I would encourage you to go and put this into a ball of yarn or on a loose cardboard piece of, or a loose cardboard tube. You can roll it around to make your life easier. I am not doing this for this video because I still have not found time or the patience to do that as of yet. So when you are starting off, make sure you leave a nice long tail for your piece. And then we are just going to start with a slip stitch. Grab my hook here. And the first line here on our worksheet is with the main color, work 35 chains. So I'm going to tighten this up, and then I'm going to work 35 chains. All right, 35, there we have it. So that's about how long mine is. I have about a medium tension on there. Yours may be a little bit longer or a little bit shorter depending upon your tension that you have working the pattern. So I'm already regretting not rolling this into a ball, but that's okay. All right, so now we're going to move on. So it says here, I'm going to try to walk you through this here. So row 1, so we want 1 single chain in second chain from the hook, and then we're going to single crochet into the next stitch, repeat from this asterisk all the way to the end, and then we're going to turn. So we are going to work 1 single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So if you remember from the beginning videos, it's not this one right here. We're going to be going into this second chain from the hook right here, and we're just going to do a single crochet. And then we are going to single crochet all the way until the end. Alrighty. So there we have single crocheted all the way down to the end. Oh, and see, this is why you should roll it into a ball beforehand. Okay, so this should be fairly easy for you guys, as this is all covered in the beginning lessons. And full disclosure, this is a little awkward for me in terms of like the camera setup. I'm trying to keep it in front of the camera for you guys. So I apologize if at any time it gets out of focus. If you have any questions as we're going through, just ask in the Facebook group. But okay, so we have single crocheted all the way to the end. Now the next step is going to be turning it. And all you're going to do to turn it is literally just flip it over. So now for row 2, we're going to chain 1. So we'll go ahead and just chain 1 here. And then we're going to single crochet into the next stitch, and again repeat all the way to the end. Alrighty guys, and that is all the way to the end. Now it says to continue to work in single crochet until piece measures 4 3/4 inches. So all we're going to do is we're going to repeat row 2 until we get it to about 4 3/4 of an inch. So with that being said, all we're going to do is turn it, chain 1, and continue along our merry way. One thing to note before I continue on with this is that counting your stitches for this piece is super important, because it will be very, very easy to add or skip stitches. And then you're going to have a wonky looking washcloth. So make sure you are counting your stitches as you go. So let's continue on here, guys. All right, guys, so we've done quite a few chains here. Now, if I were going to pretend that this was 4.5 inches, my next step would be to grab the ruler, and all I would do is just match it up to the end. And then when you get to the point where you're about 4 3/4, so about twice the size of mine here, then you would want to move on to the next step. For the sake of time and me recording this video, we're going to pretend that this is 4 3/4 of an inch right now. So now the next step is going to be adding on another color for the stripes in the washcloth. So I'm going to take my pretty blue yarn here and hope that I can find the end of the string. Oh, that was actually pretty easy, but now I guarantee you it's going to be all tangled. All right. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take the end of my yarn and I'm going to do a slip stitch just the same as we did at the beginning. And there are multiple different ways you can do this. You can do this without doing a slip stitch, but I always recommend doing it with a slip stitch. I just think it's more secure. So I'm going to do the tail end, bring it through, and then now that we have the end here, we've turned it over, I'm going to grab this on my hook and I'm going to tighten it up. And this is where it gets tricky. So we're going to need to hold on to the white yarn so we don't lose tension. Let me bring this back down into view so you guys can see what I'm doing. So we have quite a few pieces of yarn going on here. So we want to hold on to the white yarn so we're still holding tension onto the loop that's on our hook. And we have the tail of the blue yarn, which we don't want to get mixed up with the piece that's going back to the yarn ball. So all we're going to do is try to juggle all of these pieces of yarn and pull this through here. And then that is going to count as our chain 1, and we're going to try to keep that slip stitch on the outside here. And then we are going to continue on just as we have, except with this blue yarn. And for now, we're just going to let the white yarn hang here. Okay, guys? So we're just going to let it hang there, and we're going to continue on with our blue yarn. Now, because we are going to be doing 2 full rows of the stripe, that's why we're going to leave this hanging. We're going to do a different pattern a little later on, which is going to have you work this into the back of the row because we're going to use it in a different pattern. But for this one, we're just going to let it chill out here. So let's move on with our colored. Of course, this is where it gets tricky, is this very first part, because you have so many pieces of yarn sticking out everywhere. All right, guys, so there is our 2 rows for the stripe. So now what we're going to do is turn, and then we're going to pull up our white yarn here, which is attached to our white yarn ball. We're going to put the blue down a back, and we're just going to switch. So this is where it can get a little complicated. I'm going to move this out of the way. So you can see here that my yarns are kind of twisted up. So make sure that when you're doing this, you're not getting your yarns twisted up to make it a little easier on you. All right, so this is going to be a very similar procedure to before. So all we're going to do is we're going to keep the tension on that blue yarn, and actually try to do it this way. We'll turn it this way if you guys can see. So I'm keeping the tension on the blue yarn, and I have my white yarn here. I'm just going to pull the white yarn up, keep the tension on the blue, and I'm going to chain 1 with the white yarn, and you can see here that it pulls it up nicely on the side, and that's going to be covered up when we do our border, so you don't really need to worry about that. So we're going to let that blue yarn drop, we're going to grab the white, and then we're going to continue on with 2 more rows of the white. All right, guys, so you can see that we finished our 2 rows of white. So now all we're going to do is we're going to repeat that 2 more times. And again, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to repeat it 2 more times, but you would do the same thing for the other stripes. So you would get your white yarn back underneath, back underneath, make sure you are not getting anything tangled. And you are then going to pull the blue yarn up just as we did for the white, and chain 1, make sure white is still tight, that you've got it up along the side here, and then continue on to do your blue row. And once you have done that 2 more times, so you would have blue, white, blue, blue, and then you're going to be moving on to your white, and then you have those 2 more rows, then we're going to finish it off. So I'm going to drop this blue right here. And once you finish off those blue rows, just leave the string hanging for now. We will fasten that off a little bit later. So to finish this off, we're going to go back to our pattern, and it just wants us to finish with 2 more rows of single crochet with the main color. So if you were looking at this as we had finished it, so we have our 4 3/4, we have blue, 2 rows of blue, 2 rows of white, 2 rows of blue, 2 rows of white, 2 rows of blue, 2 rows of white, and then we are done. So all you need to do to finish it off is I just pull 1 more through the loop of that final chain, and I'm going to pull it out really long so this way I have a tail. And I'm going to grab my handy dandy scissors here, and we're just going to cut it. And then we'll pull that through, and then pull this tight, and then we have a knot there that's not going to come out. So that's tying off our white end, and then we're going to tie off our blue end here. So the same thing is I'm going to lay this down, cut it nice and long so we can weave in the ends. Boom, that's done. And then what I like to do with these is I just pull it tight, then I'm just going to put another knot into it. So this way I know it's not going anywhere. And again, all of this is going to be covered over by the border. So one thing that I want you guys to do before we get to the border is you're going to have all of these ends hanging off. You're going to have a little bit more because you're going to have more stripes. We're going to want to weave those in. So the way that we do that, and the easiest way, is first I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. If you guys want to, you can block your washcloths, but if you're going to be using it as a washcloth, it's honestly not worth the time to block it because you're going to be getting it wet and drying it, and it's going to be stretching, and it'll eventually get into shape. So like you can see here that if I hold it straight for you guys, it's kind of all twirly, and that's a combination of 2 things. One is that I tend to have a little bit tighter tension, so you can see that my stitches are very small and there's not huge holes in it. And also the white yarn that I used is an older yarn. I've actually had it in my closet for quite a while, so don't worry about blocking it. It's okay if it's a little wonky. So to weave in the ends, all you're going to do is take your crochet hook, and you can find anywhere on your piece that you can just weave it in. So really all I do is I just go through the bottom and pull it through. And then you're going to do this. And like I mentioned before, this is my least favorite part of crochet because it's not fun, it's not glamorous, but this is what you need to do to make your pieces pretty, right? All right, so now that we've gotten that woven in a little bit, I'm actually going to cut this short simply because we are going to have a border on this, and that will help to keep these ends in place. Now it's a little bit trickier for these ends that are kind of in the middle, so you're going to have to just look for ways that you can get it in there without it disrupting the pattern. I think for this one, because we have the border on there, I'm not really going to worry about weaving them in too much. I'm just going to kind of get them in there, and then I'll cut them off, because again the border will help to keep this all together. And then for this top one, we'll just weave it through. little bit. And then we will cut this one off too. All right, so now we have all of our ends woven in. We are going to work on the border. So the border is actually on the next page. I'm going to flip this over here. And you can see here to do the border, it says with yarn A, so that's going to be our color, which in my case is blue. We're going to rejoin the yarn to any point along the edge of the washcloth with a slip stitch. So all we're going to do is take our yarn here, and we are going to again leave a nice long tail, start our stitch, pull it close, and then we can take our washcloth and we can choose any point along here that suits our fancy to get started. So we'll just pick the very middle here up on top, get our right piece of yarn, make sure I'm in the camera for you guys. And we are going to join it with a slip stitch. So to do a slip stitch, all you do is just pull it through just like that. We're going to make sure that's tight, make sure that's tight. And then it says that we are going to work a row of single crochet evenly around the entire edge of the washcloth, placing 3 single crochets into each corner stitch to turn the corners. So that means we're going to work it just like the rest of the washcloth. So we're going to do single crochet, and then once we get to this corner, we're going to do 3. So we do 1, 2, and if I can get back in there, 3. So now we have 3 in that corner, and what that does is it gives us that nice rounded edge there, so this way it's not tight on the end and it finishes off really nice. Then once we get to the side, it gets a little bit trickier. But you can see here where you have the rows on the side. So we have 1, 2, 3. So you're just going to go on the side of the rows. Make sure that you are getting 2 pieces of yarn to do your single crochet. So this way it holds nice and tight. And then again, we get to this corner. So we're going to do 1, 2, and 3. And then we turn and move on here. Now, one thing to note too is that you can see that this is the bottom. So this was actually our starting chain. So this gets a little tricky too when you are crocheting into it. Let's see if I can get this close enough to the camera for you guys to see. So you can see here that I've started to crochet. You can just pick apart the beginning chain, and that's where you're going to want to crochet into. So we'll continue along the bottom here. Also, you guys can see that end, that woven end, oops, kind of popped up when I was crocheting it. That's totally fine, because again, this is just going to be used for washcloth, so I'm not too concerned about it. But if this was going to be a blanket or something like that where I wanted it to be super pretty, I would go back and re-crochet this, so this way it's tucked into that border. And again, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, then move on to our side. You can see here that I'm going to pay special attention to this area. Oops. Let me readjust here, give you guys a little better view, because this is where we had those blue pieces of yarn. So I want to make sure that I am getting those into the border. And the reason I'm paying special attention to those is because if you remember, that's where the yarn attaches. So I want to make sure that everything is nice and snug right in there. Then we do 1, 2, and 3 in the corner, and then we go along the top. And now that we are back to the beginning, all we're going to do is we are going to get into the top of our first single crochet, and then we are going to slip stitch. And I'm actually going to tighten that up a little bit. And then we just fasten off. So we're going to do the same thing as before. Pull it long, grab our scissors. That off, and then just tighten that baby down. So now all we have to do is weave in these two ends, and then you are done. You have officially crocheted your first washcloth. So congratulations. Yeah, so this is a perfect pattern because it is super simple, and you get to learn the basics of changing colors, which is awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed this pattern. Again, if you guys have any questions, please go into the Facebook group and ask. We do have some technical difficulties going on with this camera setup again. I apologize, it's a little awkward. So I did my best to keep it into camera view for you, but if you missed anything, if you have any additional questions, just let us know. So thank you guys so much for joining us for this pattern. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have a fantastic time crocheting your very own washcloth.